Hello and welcome to this second video reviewing Anton Bruckner. In the first part I made a claim that I feel Anton Bruckner was murdered. So I thought it would be good to give you a sort of background as what has led me to this this sort of conclusion. It's really by looking at the available photographs we have of Anton Bruckner. So this is the earliest one that I know of him. That is in 1854. The images come from the master musician's book called Bruckner by Derek Watson. Now, if we move on to this next image of him, that is in the year 1868. So he would have been about 44 years of age, and you notice he's quite stocky compared to the previous picture. He's sort of piled on the pounds, shall we say, quite sort of robust being. When we look at his diet, it seems to be the very sort of traditional sort of stew and dumplings, very heavy, stodgy food, and no doubt washed down with a couple of glasses of beer. And certainly later in life, Bruckner detested being put on a diet. So if we move on, so we now have a picture of him in 1890. Still fairly full features. So 1890, he would have already started having a few physical ailments, but they don't really show in the image of him at all. And then finally, there's this picture from 1894. So again, still fairly fit looking. By this stage, 1894, he's about 70 years old, so I would say he looks generally like a 70-year-old would look. The problem comes, I haven't got the available photos, and it's interesting, just doing a Google search, putting in Anton Bruckner and then images, I can't actually find the two relevant photos, but you may have seen them. The first one was where his friends crept up while Bruckner was asleep and photographed him while he was in bed. And the second image is in the last year of his life outside the Belvedere Lodge with two doctors, his housekeeper Kathy, his brother Ignaz, and I think there's a young girl hidden behind the one doctor. Now, curiously, in this photograph, it exists in two versions. One without Dr. Heller, who is in the far left of this particular photograph. So photoshopping clearly is nothing new, but it's why would he be removed from the photograph? I haven't actually looked into that. But what I wanted to focus on is the alarming appearance of Anton Bruckner in that picture of him while he's asleep, and that final picture of him outside the Belvedere Lodge, because now we have a man that is totally unrecognizable from the 1894 photo. The weight loss is incredible. The skin is just like hanging on the skeleton. His cheeks are drawn in. He looks totally emaciated. which is not surprising with all the illnesses and things he'd been going through at this stage. By the time he was in Belvedere Lodge, it's because he could no longer climb stairs. So those last two photos, this stark contrast, this deterioration in physical health, you could say it's down to diet or poor diet earlier in life. But this rapid decline is incredible. But what's also very noticeable in this photograph, he is standing very upright. Now, it is something that Rudolf Steiner talks about elderly people. Some of them, their heads will seem to sink in their chest. They sort of go inside themselves, or you'll get another group of elderly people who stoop over, which can be bad posture. It's not, I feel, so apparent these days, but certainly a few decades ago, a totally different generation where people would stand to attention to photographs. They would sit with a far better posture than we do today. So they didn't have this tendency to curvature of the spine. Also, such things as world wars, where a lot of men would have been drafted into the military, and obviously there's the aspect of standing to attention. And then after the Second World War, you had national service in the UK. So it was sort of instilled, this standing to attention and sitting upright. And it's certainly something it's just flashed into my mind of being told at school, sit upright. I can't remember if it was to me specifically or to the class in general. But you notice in that last photograph of Bruckner that he is standing perfectly vertical. So he's not showing the physical signs, because the body tells on the mind. So when someone has this appearance of their head is shrinking in, or they're getting the stoop from curvature of the spine, it is reflecting that they are closed-minded to anything new. They've got to whatever great age and they know it all and they can't be told different. But that is not the case with Bruckner. I feel also what contributes to his sort of resilience till the very end goes right back to his early years. With Bruckner, if you read any of the record or CD notes, musical pamphlets that go with the recording, that you'll always encounter reference to Bruckner as a composer in talking about arches of sound and structure. So this is why I thought we'd look at the physical structure of Bruckner. So in his early life, and more likely than not before his father had died, when Bruckner was only 13 years old, he would have probably, I would have thought, been helping out in the fields. At that time, especially in sort of rural parts of Austria, a school teacher's wages were not really enough to support a family on, so you had to take in other work. So part of that duty was being church organist as well as working in the fields, and that is something young Anton Bruckner would have done and did do, and certainly after the age of 13 he was still doing this, and it's a consistent pattern throughout his life. When he stopped composing around his midlife years, so between sort of 1855 or roughly about 1855 to 1861-ish, the isometric marker being 1858, he was told, or he was requested to refrain from doing any composition while he took compositional teaching under Simon Sector. And it was Simon Sector who remarked that about Bruckner and warned him that he would head for a breakdown if he didn't slow down. He was so industrious and so diligent in mastering and learning every aspect about music as a theory and as all the different aspects to composing music, learning thorough bass and such like, which he did with Simon Sector, and then carrying it on with Otto Kitzler as well, who introduced him to Wagner. Very industrious throughout his life. Now we have to turn to what Rudolf Steiner describes about our life experience, that we have 4 bodies, and one of those bodies is the etheric body or the life body, and it is finite. It'll only work for so long, but it keeps everything regulated inside the physical body. You don't have to consciously consider and instruct your various organs as to what to do. They just get on and function. I've also been reliably informed through email that Anton Bruckner, if I remember correctly, was considering taking part in an expedition, I believe, to the North Pole. And he certainly would have been a very fit physically. Accounts towards the end of his life, or in his later years, that he was still a very agile dancer. And the thing that Bruckner was known most for during his lifetime was as being an organist more than being a composer. And to play an organ, you have to have amazing coordination between all 4 limbs. If you've watched the video that I linked in the previous one in this series to St. Florian and the 5th Symphony, you'll see that the organist, his feet are going across all these different numerous foot pedals, and obviously you're playing on different registers with the left and right hand with an organ, so there's an awful lot of coordination required just to play an organ, which also would require a lot of physical stamina. So you could look at the early life of Anton Bruckner and having long working hours, being out in the fields, deputizing for his father on the organ, and then at really an early age becoming sort of deputy school teacher as well. It sort of set him up as a sort of physical training that I feel kept him going. So whilst the onset of illnesses starts, I think about 1887, he has the stamina to combat this and still keep, through sheer determination, to keep going with completing the 9th Symphony finale, as well as revising Symphony 8, Symphony 4, Symphony 3, Symphony 2, and yeah, so 5 of his symphonies he'd also revised. So that would have eaten into his time, as well as all his other duties. And he's also known for taking on unpaid teaching roles in Vienna Conservatoire. So he was no stranger to working long hours and putting in a lot of mental and physical effort into things. So, and also the accounts of him being a very agile dancer as well, all show that he was remarkably fit till quite late in life. But that sudden deterioration in his health is what got me thinking, hang on, something doesn't add up here. This is only my own perspective on this, and of course all this series of videos in what I'm asserting here is really based on intuition and feeling. And I would even go so far as to say that the spirit of Bruckner is influencing me to express this at this time. So this sudden deterioration, it just doesn't feel right to me. But then we need to find a motive for this as well. But before I go on to that, the next part I'm going to look at the psychology of Anton Bruckner, which will then lead on to establishing the motive for why he would have been poisoned. So I hope you like what I've put together so far, and that you'll stick with this, because I feel it will answer another unanswered question about why radio broadcasts have been changed from 432 hertz to 440 hertz. I feel the origins of answering that question lie with this investigation into Anton Bruckner. So yes, next episode we will look at his psychology, his mental state, his approach to things, and reassess this often quoted thing that Bruckner is misunderstood. Yes, I feel he is misunderstood, but not for the accepted reasons that have been put forward. But we'll come on to that in the next episode. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will join me again for the next video in this, what's probably going to be maybe 4 or 5 videos, the way things are going. Thank you very much.